you hear good things.
They called it the vampire murder. Said it was too twisted to be true. A 12-year-old girl, her 23-year-old boyfriend, and a house soaked in blood. It happened in Medicine Hat, Alberta, a quiet Canadian suburb that hadn't seen a homicide in over a decade, until April 23rd, 2006. Until someone looked through a basement window and saw what was left of the Richardson family. Mark and Deborah Richardson stabbed to death in their home. Their 8-year-old son, Jacob, found upstairs, his throat slit. No sign of a break-in, no signs of a struggle, just silence and 3 bodies. And 1 person is missing. Jasmine, 12 years old, gone. The police feared she'd been kidnapped until they checked her locker at school and found her love letters, poems, fantasies about running away and killing anyone who stood in the way. Jasmine wasn't missing. She was hiding with her boyfriend, a man named Jeremy Steinke. He wore a vial of blood around his neck, told people he was a 300-year-old werewolf, and called Jasmine his soulmate. When the two were finally found, camping, laughing, and curled together in a truck, it was clear. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was a plan. 3 murders, 2 killers, and one of them barely old enough to wear eyeliner. I'm Sidney Smith, and this is Murderous Podcast. And this week's Murderous is Jasmine Richardson in episode 86, The Girl Who Smiled Through the Blood. Jasmine Richardson was born in 1993 in Medicine Hat, Alberta, a prairie town where people left their doors unlocked, kids rode their bikes until dusk, and families knew each other by name. To the outside world, Jasmine's life looked normal, stable, safe. Her parents, Mark and Deborah, were strict, but loving. Mark worked in an industrial plant, the kind of man who fixed things himself and always showed up on time. Deborah was a social worker, empathetic, sharp, and attentive to detail. They were active in their church, protective of their daughter, and absolutely unprepared for what was coming. Jasmine was smart, creative, a little withdrawn, but not in a concerning way. She loved animals. She loved art. She was the kind of kid who could be quiet for hours, lost in a drawing, or sitting with headphones on, scribbling in a journal. But something started to shift when she turned 11. A new friend group, a new attitude. She began wearing black eyeliner, dog collars, and long sleeves, even in the summer. She said it was goth, said it was just a phase. Her parents didn't love it, but they chalked it up to early rebellion, middle school angst. Then came the online chats. Jasmine created a profile on a site called vampirefreaks.com. It was meant to be a space for alternative teens to connect, but it was a breeding ground for older men, disturbing roleplay, and fantasy forums that blurred the line between identity and delusion. That's where she met Jeremy Steinke. He was 23, she was 11. Jeremy told her he was a 300-year-old werewolf, that he drank blood, that no one had ever understood him until her. And Jasmine, barely out of childhood, and in my opinion, I would say not out of childhood, but she fell for it, and she fell for it hard. They began messaging constantly. He sent her poems soaked in death and longing. She sent him hearts and I love yous. They started meeting in secret. He brought her jewelry, let her sip alcohol, told her she was his dark angel, that they were destined, that no one, especially her parents, could keep them apart. When Mark and Deborah found out, they were horrified. They grounded her, took away her internet access, told her she couldn't see him again. They said he was dangerous, a predator, and they were right. But by then, it was too late. Because Jeremy had already told her, if they try to stop us, we'll get rid of them. And Jasmine didn't just agree. She helped plan it. To her classmates, Jasmine Richardson seemed like any other moody seventh grader. She sat in the back of the room, doodled skulls in the margins of her notebook, told teachers she hated math, hated gym, hated mornings. But she wasn't failing. She wasn't acting out in class. She was flying just under the radar until she wasn't. The girl who used to love the Lion King started wearing black lace gloves, started calling herself a runaway devil in online forums, started telling people she was older than she really was. Her parents noticed the change. They tried to pull her closer. Deborah started checking her browser history. Mark picked her up from school more often. They sat down with her together, trying to understand what was happening, to remind her who she was before all the eyeliner and silence. But Jasmine met their concern with coldness. She told them they were embarrassing, that they didn't understand her world, didn't want her to be happy. She rolled her eyes at their rules, mocked their warnings, locked her door, and turned up her music. To Jasmine, their love felt like a leash, and she was ready to snap it. She told friends her parents were abusive, controlling, said they hated her, said they didn't want her to be happy. She said it like a girl rehearsing a part. But her friends didn't know that Jasmine was already playing a different role online. On vampirefreaks.com, she was a gothic temptress, mature, rebellious, dangerous. She posted dark poetry, lines scrawled in lowercase, soaked in sadness and romantic violence. One read, "Bleeding is the only way I know I'm still alive. You can't kill a girl who's already dead inside." Another was this one. "Our love is a dagger, sharp, forbidden, eternal." And alongside the words, grainy mirror selfies and black corsets. Fishnet gloves pulled tight to the elbow. A dog collar with silver spikes. Eyes rimmed in eyeliner so dark it looked like bruises. She looked older than 12, if you didn't look too long. And that's where Jeremy Steinke saw her. He was 23, unemployed, living in his mother's trailer. I know what you're thinking. Of course he was. Jeremy was into role play and horrorcore music. He wore a long black trench coat and a dog collar in public. He told people he believed he was a werewolf, cursed by the moon, misunderstood by humans. Most people rolled their eyes. But Jasmine, she adored him. He messaged her. She wrote back. They talked about vampires, love, blood. He told her he'd never felt this way before. She said the same. When they finally met in person, it wasn't dramatic. It was at a punk show. Jeremy showed up in eyeliner and leather. Jasmine wore a choker and thigh-high socks. To everyone else, it looked like cosplay. To them, it was destiny. He kissed her. She told him she loved him. And he believed her. Because she meant it. They started meeting in secret. Behind dumpsters. At playgrounds. In his car. He brought her alcohol. She brought him drawings. They took pictures of each other on disposable cameras. He called her my vampire bride. She said they'd be together forever. When Jasmine's parents found out, they were horrified. They grounded her, took her computer, tried to explain to her that she was being groomed, that she was a child, and that he was dangerous. But Jasmine wasn't scared. She was angry, furious. She told Jeremy they were trying to tear them apart. And that's when the messages changed. Jeremy started writing about murder. Not in a metaphorical way. Not as fantasy. He made lists. Wrote out scenarios. Told Jasmine he wanted to slit her parents' throats and burn the house down. Like a phoenix rising, he said. He told her they could be like Bonnie and Clyde, but darker, more devoted, untouchable. He wrote, "The souls of your parents are a small price to pay for eternal love." And Jasmine, she didn't just nod along. She sharpened it. She started talking about which room to do it in, about how her brother would be a collateral damage. She said it like she was talking about a chore, something unpleasant, but necessary. Some of the messages between Jasmine and Jeremy were too explicit or disturbing to include here, but I'm going to post them for you on Patreon if you want to go a little bit deeper. In one message, she told him, "The world doesn't want us together, so we'll make a new one. No hesitation, no shock, just pure teenage certainty, weaponized." They wrote back and forth like co-authors of a fantasy novel soaked in real blood. In one message, Jeremy wrote, "My lover's rents are totally unfair. They say I can't see you. They treat you like shit. They deserve to be executed." And Jasmine replied, "I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." And the most disturbing part of it all, there was no fear in her words, no hesitation, just cold conviction. They joked about it, made playlists, referred to murder as the cure. This wasn't just manipulation. It wasn't just a predator and a victim. It was something darker. Two fantasies feeding each other until they became real. On April 21st, 2006, just 2 days before the murders, Jasmine told her best friend, "I have a plan. It's going to fix everything. Don't worry about me." The friend thought she was being dramatic, that she meant sneaking out, maybe running away. But Jasmine didn't want to escape. She wanted to start over. And the only way to do that was to erase everything in her way. On the outside, Jasmine was still playing the part. She went to school, turned in her homework, sat at the dinner table without saying much. No red flags loud enough to trigger panic. But inside, she and Jeremy were building something dangerous. One secret message at a time. Their online chats shifted from poems and declarations of love to planning. Real planning. They talked about gloves, weapons, what time her parents went to sleep, what to do if Jacob, her 8-year-old brother, woke up. Jasmine called it a mission. Jeremy called it the night we become free. And together, they made a list. Step by step. Kill her parents, kill her brother, run away together. They even picked out their outfits. Black, tactical, poetic, Jasmine said. At school, she passed notes to friends that read like horror fan fiction. He's mine forever. No one can stop us. If they try, they'll regret it. But no one took her seriously. They thought she was being, again, dramatic, playing the goth card a little too hard. But Jeremy wasn't playing. He told his friends what he was planning. Said he was going to do something big. Said love was worth any price. One friend said Jeremy grinned and whispered, "It'll be the most romantic thing anyone's ever done." They laughed, called him a freak, thought it was all talk. But Jeremy had already packed a knife, had already decided what night it would be. And Jasmine didn't try to stop him. She helped him choose the day. April 23rd, 2006. A Sunday. Her parents would be home. Her brother would be in bed early. And the house would be quiet. The night before the murders, Jasmine went to a 12-year-old friend's slumber party. You almost forget she's 12 until I read that part, don't you? You almost forget. So she went to the slumber party. She painted her nails, braided someone's hair, watched cartoons like nothing was coming. The next morning, she told the friend she had to leave early. Family stuff. She put on black, applied thick eyeliner, and waited. Jeremy showed up that night with a knife and a hoodie. He wore a black bandana over his mouth, called himself a soldier of love. Jasmine led him in through the basement, No alarm. No forced entry. Inside the house, Mark and Deborah were winding down. They had no idea their daughter had unlocked the door to a killer. Mark was first. He heard something downstairs, probably the creak of a step, and went to check it out. Jeremy attacked him, stabbed him over and over. Mark fought back hard. He was strong, bigger, older. But Jeremy was frenzied, fueled by rage, fantasy, and adrenaline. He stabbed Mark Richardson 24 times. Deborah screamed, ran toward the noise. Jasmine just watched. When it was over, her parents were lying in pools of blood. Their daughter stood calmly above them. Then came the worst part. Jacob, 8 years old, sleeping in his room, safe, until Jasmine told Jeremy he couldn't be left behind. They climbed the stairs, quietly, deliberately. Jacob woke up when Jeremy entered. He begged, cried, but Jeremy held him down and slit his throat. Jasmine stood nearby. Some reports say she turned away. Others say she helped hold the boy still. Either way, she didn't stop it. Afterward, the two didn't run. Not immediately. They raided the fridge, ate food, laughed. They called it their wedding night, and then they left. It was just after 1 p.m. on April 23, 2006, when a young neighbor, just 6 years old, wandered into the Richardsons' family's yard. He looked through the basement window, curious, and what he saw made him run home screaming. Inside the house were 3 bodies. Police arrived within minutes of the neighbor's call. 2 patrol cars, guns holstered, no sirens. From the outside, the Richardson home looked perfectly normal. Quiet, clean, unbothered. The wind moved gently through the trees. There were no shattered windows, no sign of a break-in, no sound at all. The front door was locked. An officer circled the house while another tried the back. Still locked. Still nothing. But the blinds on the basement window were open, and that's where they saw it. A body, motionless, surrounded by deep pools of blood. They forced entry through the front, then moved in with measured steps, weapons drawn. Inside the house smelled faintly of cleaning products, but the metallic bite of blood hit them just as fast. The living room was neat, TV off, shoes by the door, a half-drunk glass of water on the kitchen counter. No overturned chairs, no broken lamps, no chaos, just tension. Then at the top of the basement stairs, Mark Richardson, face down. A pool of blood spreading from beneath his chest and neck. His arms were twisted beneath him, as if he'd been caught mid-struggle. Just a few steps below, Deborah, flat on her back, her eyes open, her shirt soaked through with blood. There were stab wounds on her torso, her arms, and her neck. One of the officers said later, "You could tell she saw it coming. She had time to feel it." Mark had been stabbed 24 times, like I mentioned before, and Deborah, at least a dozen. And still, no sign of a forced entry. No signs of struggle in the main rooms. No blood on the door handles. They moved upstairs. Jacob's door was slightly ajar. Inside, a small twin bed, dinosaur sheets, a nightlight glowing faintly in the corner, and young Jacob, his 8-year-old body, lying beside a stuffed animal. His throat had been slit so deeply that tissue and muscle were exposed. He was still in his pajamas, one sock half on. A bruise on his lip suggested he had cried out before it happened or tried to beg. There was blood on the bed sheets, blood on the walls, but no sign of a struggle. He'd been overwhelmed fast. The officers moved on. Jasmine's room was down the hall. The door creaked as it opened, and what they found was the most unsettling thing yet. The bed was perfectly made. A plush toy sat in the center. The dresser was untouched. Jewelry laid neatly across the top, nothing missing. Her closet was closed. No blood, no drag marks, no broken glass. Just a quiet, girlish room, frozen in time. Like its occupant had simply stepped out for school or disappeared entirely. But to the detectives, it felt off. Too clean, too staged, too preserved. One officer said it looked more like a setup than a scene. It was the only room in the house that didn't feel like death had passed through. And that's when the questions started, because the bodies told one story, but the missing girl, she was about to tell another. At first, investigators feared the worst. They issued an Amber Alert, called in search teams, told the press they were looking for a missing 12-year-old girl, possibly abducted during a triple homicide. But the crime scene wasn't matching that story. The house showed signs of calm entry. No damage to the doors. No signs of chaos near Jasmine's room. Detectives found her school bag, and inside, a locker key. When they opened the locker, what they found ended the missing persons case immediately. Dozens of notes, printouts of emails, drawings of her and Jeremy holding bloody knives standing over her parents' corpses. One read, "It begins with me killing them and ends with us being together." The Amber Alert was canceled. Jasmine Richardson wasn't missing. She was wanted. The manhunt shifted. Now they were searching for two people, a 12-year-old girl and her 23-year-old boyfriend. The public reeled. Even seasoned officers were shaken. One investigator said, "I've never seen a crime this violent carried out with this much planning by a child." Within hours, tips came in. A friend of Jeremy's told police he'd been bragging about a plan. Another said he'd been acting strange, calm, euphoric, like someone coming down from a high. The two were eventually spotted in Leader, Saskatchewan, over 80 miles away. They were camping behind a grocery store, sleeping in the back of a pickup truck. When officers approached, they found them curled up in each other's arms, half asleep. Jeremy had a knife in his backpack. Jasmine had her eyeliner perfectly applied. Neither resisted arrest. They weren't shocked. They weren't crying. They were smiling. One officer described Jasmine as detached, almost giddy, like she didn't understand what she'd done or didn't care. Jeremy told police it was all for love. Said he'd do it again. Said Jasmine was the only light in his hellish world. Jasmine said very little. Just that her parents had been mean. That her brother got in the way. That now things were better. Back in Medicine Hat, the town was in free fall. 3 murders, a 12-year-old as a co-conspirator, a man in his 20s who thought he was a werewolf, and a quiet neighborhood now burned into Canada's criminal history. The community held vigils, lit candles, left flowers on the lawn of a house that still smelled like bleach and rot. But no one could make sense of it. The child they once waved to on the sidewalk had helped butcher her family. And when her mugshot hit the news, people weren't angry. They were horrified. Because Jasmine Richardson didn't look wild. She didn't look haunted. She looked like any other middle school girl. Hair brushed, eyes calm, head tilted slightly with a smile. The town of Medicine Hat didn't sleep for weeks. The headlines didn't either. 12-year-old charged in triple homicide. Vampire cult, love story ends in blood. I'd do it again, says accused killer. The public wanted answers. The justice system had to figure out how to give them that. Jeremy Steinke was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. No debate. He was 23. He'd admitted to the stabbings. He called it a gift to Jasmine. But Jasmine's case was something else entirely. She wasn't a witness. She wasn't a victim. She was a participant. A child who helped orchestrate a massacre. And the law had limits. Under the Youth Criminal Justice Act in Canada, no one under the age of 14 could be tried as an adult, no matter how brutal the crime, no matter how many people died. So Jasmine Richardson, age 12, was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, but would be tried in youth court. And that changed everything. She was placed in a psychiatric facility, not a prison. Her name was initially withheld. She wasn't allowed to appear in open court, and if convicted, the maximum sentence she could receive was 10 years. The public was outraged, but the law didn't care. In court, Jasmine appeared calm. She wore sweaters and soft makeup. Her hair neatly parted. She answered questions with a voice barely above a whisper. One of the lead investigators said, she didn't act like someone who just lost her family. She acted like someone who'd finished a project. The prosecution presented the emails, the drawings, the witness statements from friends who heard heard her fantasize about murder. But what stuck with the jury, what chilled them, was the planning. Not the passion, not the rage, planning. They saw evidence of a murder calendar, complete with targets, motivations, and backup plans. They saw how Jasmine had referred to her brother, Jacob, as collateral. How she said she wanted to be free from her parents' oppression. How she wrote things like, "We'll be together. Nothing else matters. Not even blood." The defense tried to argue that Jeremy had manipulated her, that she was too young to understand what she was doing, that she was brainwashed by a mentally unstable adult. And there was truth to that. He was older. He was obsessive. He'd fed her fantasy with fire. But the jury also saw her actions. How she let him in. How she stayed. How she celebrated after. They knew she wasn't forced. She was willing. Jasmine Richardson was found guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder. And on July 9th, 2007, she became the youngest person in Canadian history ever convicted of multiple homicides. Her sentence, 10 years, the maximum allowed under Canadian law for a youth. 6 years in custody, 4 years under community supervision, therapy, counseling, progress reports, but no prison, no life sentence, no criminal record once she aged out. Jeremy Steinke, now legally an adult and fully tried as one, was convicted as well. He received 3 concurrent life sentences with no parole eligibility for 25 years. In a statement after his conviction, he said, "I found my soulmate. I did what had to be done. I regret nothing." And Jasmine, she never spoke to the press, never apologized publicly. She returned to the facility and waited for the world to forget. Jasmine Richardson walked out of custody in 2016. She was 22 years old, free, unsupervised, her criminal record sealed, her name wiped clean by Canadian law. No press conference, no photos, no apology. Just a quiet release into a country that didn't quite know what to do with her. Legally, she had served her time. She had completed the maximum sentence allowed under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. She'd gone through the counseling, earned good behavior reports, passed psychiatric evaluations. According to the system, she was rehabilitated. But the town of Medicine Hat never healed. The Richardson house was sold, renovated, but no one stayed in it for long. Neighbors said the air around it still felt heavy, that they'd seen porch lights flicker at odd hours, that kids dared each other to knock on the door at night. The grave of Mark, Deborah, and Jacob sits just a few miles away. 3 names, 1 stone. A child buried between the parents who tried to save her and couldn't. As for Jeremy Steinke, he changed his name in prison, legally. He now goes by Jackson May. He continues to serve his life sentence with no parole eligibility until 2031. And even then, it's unclear if anyone would ever let him out. He once told a prison psychologist, "We didn't do anything wrong. We just did what love required." He still refers to Jasmine as his soulmate, but she no longer acknowledges him. Jasmine has never spoken publicly, not about the night of the murders, not about her parents, not about Jacob, not even about Jeremy. She changed her name, lives somewhere in Canada, and by law, she's allowed to. No one is supposed to track her. No media outlet is allowed to publish her new identity. She could be a barista, a law student, a volunteer at a youth center. You could pass her on the street and never know. And maybe that's the part that stays with people the most. That someone who helped plan the murder of her family could grow up, blend in, and walk away. No records, no accountability, no visibility. Just silence. But in Medicine Hat, they haven't forgotten. They are still people who cross the street when they see a girl in heavy eyeliner. Still parents who lock their doors at night and double check the basement. Not because they think Jasmine will return, but because now they know. Monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear lip gloss, carry a sketchbook, smile in school pictures, and sometimes they're not monsters at all. They're just children, raised in the light, drawn to the dark, and never quite pull back. You've been listening to a production of Sidney Smith Creative, LLC, and the You Hear Good Things Podcast Network, all rights reserved. For more true crime stories that stay with you, follow Murderous Podcast on your favorite platform and join the community on Patreon for early access, bonus content, and deeper cults. If you want to join the Patreon, look for it under Sidney Smith Creative, CRE8 TIV. What stuck with you with this one? Was it the planning? Her age? The way fantasy turned into blood on the walls? And what does justice even mean when someone who helped kill a family can walk away without a record? Leave a review on Apple or Castbox. Follow the show on Spotify or iHeart so you never miss a Wednesday drop. And if this one left you quiet, send me a DM. Just hit that link right there in the episode description. You are the quiet jury, and your verdict matters. Want to read the actual messages Jasmine and Jeremy sent to each other? The ones too disturbing for the episode? You'll find them on the Patreon at Sidney Smith Creative. On-air sources: R vs. JR, Youth Court of Alberta. CBC News and Global News coverage 2006 to 2008. Psychiatric reports from Dr. Peter R. Rennell's Youth Sentencing Hearing. Court documents and trial summaries from Medicine Hat Provincial Court. Public records and interviews with Crown prosecutors and law enforcement. Archive forums and profiles from vampirefreaks.com via Wayback Machine. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious.